Welcome to Two Tall Guys Talking Sales, where Kevin Lawson and Sean O'Shaughnessy bring you powerful insights to elevate your sales strategy. Today, they're tackling a common challenge for small sales teams, managing vast territories effectively without becoming overwhelmed. You'll hear about the importance of refining your ideal client profile and why focusing only on prospects that match your top clients can supercharge your sales. Kevin and Sean also share their method for leveraging current clients as networking assets, making it easier to open doors to high-potential accounts. Stay tuned. These strategies could be the key to more thoughtful and intentional business growth.
Let's start with story time, Sean. What is the year where you flew the most or logged the most miles as a salesperson or leader?
So my worst year, because as you know, I started my practice as a fractional VP of sales because I got tired of flying all the time. So my worst year was about 150,000 miles in 1 year. That was a bad year. I said goodbye to my kids almost all the time. I missed so much stuff. My kids were relatively young at the time. As you know, my kids aren't young anymore, but I flew a lot. If it was Tuesday morning, that meant I was having breakfast at the airport because my first flight was usually at about 8:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. So I'd have breakfast at the airport. And I didn't get back until Friday afternoon, just about every week.
Holy cow. For those of you who may not have flown a lot, that's like driving 70,000 miles a year just for work. That's if you only drive, that's a huge amount of miles if you're not a truck driver. So, Sean, that's crazy. I've got to say categorically, if you were a direct report for me that time, I would be auditing your expense report, looking for where you're actually going on vacation. I don't know. That's just a lot of miles. But I bring that up because I think that we are at a point in our practices and in how we serve the market where not only are we facing a new year, meaning we need to have a sales strategy for new year, but we've probably got some listeners out there who have territories that are gigantic. Think just kind of along the lines of, we can sell our product or solution to anyone in the United States. That's what most would call a big sales territory, right? I would also suggest that if you're a person who's not flying, maybe you're selling locally or domestically, that'd be like having one or two states as your entire coverage region, and you're really trying to grow sales, but you've just got a lot of distance, a lot of miles between potential customers. What does a sales leader or a business owner who's got less than 5 salespeople on their team do in a situation like that where they say, I have got a massive territory and I don't know how to grow it effectively because of the distance between customers and prospects?
I think that's a really challenging problem that you just put in front of everybody. And let's make up some scenarios here. Let's say the product that you sell or the service you provide, which by the way, I call product and service the same thing. I call it a product. The product that you sell has to have a certain amount of pressing the flesh. You have to shake hands with the person. Maybe you're selling to manufacturers, so you got to walk in their plant a little bit. You can't sell it over the phone. You probably can't sell it all in Zoom calls or whatever tool, Teams, whatever tool that you like to use. Because obviously that's one solution to the problem is like, if I have a massive territory, if I have half the country, a quarter of the country, 2 states, whatever, even if you have a state, like you and I both live in the state of Ohio. The state of Ohio is a big state. There's some really, really big and populous states that if that was your territory, there's probably a lot of companies you can call on. So let's just imagine for this scenario that you've laid out in front of us, that you have to go see people. You have to travel, because that's a different question if we can actually not travel. The traveling salesperson that has to go city by city, spend a lot of time in the car, spend a lot of time on airplanes, whatever the case may be. The challenge with them is focus. They have so many people to sell to that they never truly focus on developing any speciality within their customers, within their industries, whatever. And I like to say, if you are small enough that you only have 4 or 5 salespeople, then you probably shouldn't be focusing on industry too much. However, you do need to account for all that travel time. And you really need to think about, well, what is my best customer? And you and I have talked about ideal customer profile or ideal client profile a lot on this podcast. And so if people don't know what that is, go do some searching in our old podcasts because they're all over the place on that. However, if you have a small amount of salespeople with a huge territory, I like to tell clients, look, don't call on anybody that isn't your favorite customer. And I usually say top 10. Take a look at your top 10 customers, the ones you really like. So you might have a top 10 that you don't like because they don't bill well, they don't pay well, whatever. But your top 10 favorite customers. And you shouldn't have anybody in your prospect list that isn't a duplicate, a twin of somebody that's in your top 10 clients.
I love that. So what I'm hearing from you, I'm going to do the conjugate translate kind of moment here. The business owners that we're talking about, they're people like us. We are individual business owners and we are individual sales people and we're leading ourselves. We're our own sales leaders. So people like us that are going out to the market and selling, or people with a small team of, we're calling it less than 5 sellers. We call that a small team. A medium-sized team would be 10 to 50 sellers, and large teams would be above that. So that's how we're kind of bracketing those numbers of headcount in the sales discipline. When you have less than 5 sellers on your team, your ideal client profile becomes really, really important. And oftentimes, if you've not looked at your prospect list and said, which of these prospects fit my ideal client profile, that's a key thing you can do. You can do that today before dinner, before lunch, whatever time of day you're listening to this. You can do that quickly. Pull out the document, look at your prospect list and say, are they in the right size company or right size employee range or revenue range or geography? Do they do the specific things that we offer? Can they buy? Now, here's a key one that I love to put in front of owners and say, hey, do you want to grow your business? Let's be intentional. Can your ideal prospect buy your full line sheet of services? If you are a home center construction technologies, if you're SaaS, doesn't matter what you are, if somebody can only buy one thin slice of what you offer, they're probably not your ideal client. Oh, Kevin, but what if it's a huge, huge company that could spend, with lots of commas and zeros in it? Well, that's great. But because they can't buy everything from you, you're going to devote a lot of calories, i.e. resources, into serving that one really large whale of a customer in a very thin slice. And what happens when you've got a very, very light handhold with a customer with a really big dollar amount? You're a target and you're liable to get auctioned off at the next renewal cycle, which means you will have neglected the rest of your business trying to serve the whale. Now, that may sound really appealing to those of you who are visionaries who are trying to wrap your arms around the world. But when we're thinking about forecasting and planning for next year's growth and scale and how we're going to repeat or grow on top of this year, that strategy is really hard to accomplish, and it often ends with a really bad year. So let's focus back to that ideal client profile and get even more specific on your prospects and spend your time with those people. And to Sean's, I love your wording there, Sean, that look like, smell like, act like your favorite customers in your top 10.
Yeah, and I think this is really important because as part of that ideal client profile, and you and I help people do ideal client profile analysis all the time. It's one of the first things we do when we enter in with a customer. Is we'll say, let's talk about your ideal client profile. We'll build that out for them. We'll help them develop it. And typically, I won't put this into the ideal client profile until we start talking about territories. Because the next thing that I always talk about is, can we work with them? In other words, can we get access to them? So it doesn't matter when you have 5 salespeople, 3 salespeople, and you're calling on the entire United States. It doesn't really matter if that customer is perfect if you don't have a way to get into them. If you can't network into them, if you can't get an introduction to that customer and to that prospect. So part of your ideal favorite client, ideal client profile is I can get them. They will respond to me when I reach out to them. I have a story that I can tell them that is exactly what they do. And that's part of being like your top 10, but also your top 10 should be the entree into those ideal client profiles. Because if those are your favorite top 10 customers, in theory, you have a good relationship with them. In theory, you can say, hey, Joe, can you introduce me to that place that you used to work at that's just like your company right now? Because I want to get access to them. So how do you get to the customer? How do you talk to a customer? Most of the salespeople that I talk to on a regular basis say, I need more leads. I need leads. I need ways to get in. I can't prospect into my clients fast enough and efficiently enough. Well, stop prospecting and start networking. Start getting introductions from your good customers. Start getting introductions from your great place to go. So your top 10 are not just your top 10, but they're also your referral partners. You're going to ask them for help in case studies, good stories that you can tell about them. Maybe you have to homogenize their name. You got to take Coca-Cola off the name because can't talk about that company, but you can describe Coca-Cola and describe what they do. I'm making up a company, obviously, with Coca-Cola, but you should be able to tell a story to another customer that is going to be eye-opening, like, we helped Coca-Cola do X. And maybe you can't say the word Coca-Cola. We helped our big beverage manufacturer do X. And that's powerful, and that allows you to get into that customer. So when you're thinking about your favorites, the favorites have to be, can I get there?
And when you get there, what are you going to say? Now, this is even more important when Sean and I take an ideal client profile that has been really well vetted, and we press in the clutch and go find second gear. We start talking about personas. When we get there, what matters to the person that I'm talking to? How do we help them achieve their goals? So again, if you are 5 sellers or less on a team, we're getting very specific with you, gang, here, because you're kind of the lifeblood of the U.S. economy here. Small business is where the economy is driven. So we want you, Sean and I have made our market commitment to you all to impact the way you do business and how effective you are at it. So ideal client plus persona, who I'm talking to, title, their career goals. If you're struggling to develop a persona for your ideal client profile, ask yourself this question. How does that person earn a bonus? That's what they care about. Talk about that stuff. If your product doesn't match that stuff, you might be talking to the wrong persona at the right ideal client profile. So, and again, back to the thing we're talking about doing. When you've got really big territories, you've got to figure out where you can play effectively the most. If I'm going to call on a tier 2 or tier 3 automotive manufacturer, I'm probably going to start in Detroit. I'm probably going to go to Tennessee a few times. I'm going to be looking in pockets of where these people live. If there's only one bearings or motor mounts manufacturer and they're in Oklahoma and my office is in New Jersey or New York, I might not target them as a growth target for next year. I'm going to be intentional and specific with my time and my resources and coaching my team and their resources on where to get the most value for their effort. Sales effectiveness, sales efficiency are 2 different measures. Today's not the day to go through those measures, but noting that you can drive those as strategic levers in your business can help you grow strategically next year. So the takeaway for me, and I'm going to punt it back to Sean here to wrap us up here, but the takeaway for me from this discussion today is that next year is coming soon. We have a limited amount of hours in the year, amount of flights we can take, miles we can drive, and customers that will see us that we want to see that are ideal for us to serve. Let's be really intentional and not be pie in the sky on this. Let's be realistic and go after the places that we can make a difference.
And then the last little thought, and maybe we'll talk about this in a future episode, but the last little thought on this is, if you have the world as your territory, or North America as your territory, or half of North America as your territory, your quota cannot be everybody that can buy your product. Your quota needs to be based on how many people can you actually see, and how many people can you actually do a deal with, and how many deals can you do. So that comes into length of sales cycle. How long does it take to make a decision? Don't assume the decision will be made the first time you walk in the door. All of those conversations need to happen. And we'll talk about more on that in a future episode of Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. But right now, Kevin, we have used up our 15 minutes again. And it seems like we always have more things to talk about than we can possibly cover. That's okay, because our commitment to our listeners is 15 minutes, little bits of wisdom. Come back next week, get some more wisdom. If you didn't know what an ideal client profile is, literally Google our site, get on our site, go through a list. We have ideal client profile in our discussions all the time. We give you lots of good advice. Kevin and I also are on LinkedIn. And if you would like, reach out to us directly. You can find our contact information on our show notes. You can also take an assessment on those show notes about how great you are or where you need help. Thank you very much for your time.
What a great episode, Sean and Kevin. Today, I learned so much about the power of networking with existing clients instead of relying on cold prospecting, a game-changing approach for smaller sales teams covering vast territories. Rather than starting every conversation from scratch, Kevin and Sean suggest tapping into your top clients for introductions and referrals. This technique saves time and gives you a warm lead from someone who already trusts and values your services. Imagine the difference this could make in how quickly you build relationships and fill your pipeline. Now let's not overlook the actionable item they shared: refining your ideal client profile by focusing only on prospects who resemble your top customers. This is a simple yet impactful way to ensure you're spending time with the best prospects. Before diving back into daily business, why not take a few minutes to review your prospect list? Aligning your prospects with those top-tier clients could save countless hours and bring you closer to high-value opportunities. Remember, Sean and Kevin are just a message away if you ever need help with sales, sales management, or scaling your company. The show notes includes their contact information and a quick 10-question assessment to gauge the health of your current sales approach. It's a great way to get a snapshot of where your team shines and where there's room to grow. Until next Tuesday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Happy selling!